Hi, everyone. It's Jen. I want to share with you this great conversation that I had with an LA filmmaker named Tchaiko, who I've gotten to know over the past 6 months and who's really just an incredible, wonderful, creative person who talks about, and her work focuses on a lot of the stuff that we all talk about in the You're Not Pretty Enough realm. So she has a short that she produced called Solace that she's now in the process of exploding into a feature film. And we have this really cool conversation about how her own personal story of recovering from eating disorder has really helped her and compelled her to make this film. While that's something that's going on in the background, eating disorder and compulsions, it's really about that universal feeling that we all have of fitting in to this life and looking at somebody else's life and at first thinking, oh, they have it all together, and then realizing, no, that's not the case. We all have our own shit to deal with. So I want to first show you the trailer, and then that'll go right to a conversation with Tchaiko. Enjoy.
I'll take two of those. Watch it.
Good morning, Tchaiko.
Morning, Jen.
So happy to have you here and happy to have this
Excited.
conversation. It's really important. I first want to ask you what compelled you to make your film Solace?
I think just the kind of artist that I am, everything that I do always, I have to find some sort of personal connection to it. So even when I did music videos for musicians, I still had to find something of me in there.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just something that I think for me, it completely changed my life. And I've had a lot of things happen to me in my life that for other people would seem huge. Wars, coups, moved around to a bunch of different countries, but this thing that I couldn't control, that I just was very baffled by for like most of my life, when I finally figured out, oh, you have this issue, oh, okay, and I started to get into recovery, like it was just completely life altering. And so, that's what really inspired it.
Yeah. So tell me, when you say this issue, talk to me about what you mean.
Eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 30, I kind of hit a rock bottom with just stuff going on in my life. I had just gotten out of a relationship, which is why I really bonded with your book.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'd gotten out of a relationship, and in previous relationships, I'd always thought that there was something wrong with the other person, and that I was the like healthy, together one, just being there for other people.
Right.
And when this relationship ended, I went to a place that was like unimaginable. I stopped eating, and then I started eating even more than I did before. And then I started to be really obsessed with how like empty my stomach was feeling, which for most of my life I'd always wanted to be super skinny, but like I hadn't really had that. I think like just I guess pleasure of having an empty stomach. Probably partially because I could never stop eating, but. But so anyway, so that sort of started like this really rock bottom of like swinging between like not eating anything and smoking tons of cigarettes, and then like binging on very healthy food, I might add, but it didn't matter. Like,
Right.
which is another reason why it never occurred to me that I had an eating disorder, because I wasn't obese. I can't even really talk about being overweight because my brain still actually, I know not to listen to my brain about that, but on the outside, I didn't seem to have a problem, and I ate healthy food, but I knew on the inside, something was really wrong. And that was sort of the turning point where I was like, fuck, I need to get help.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what was the first thing that you did to get help? What did you do to help yourself?
I called, and this is a reason why the film is so important to me, because of somebody else who told me about this issue. I had a friend who said she was an overeater, and she was talking about her sort of recovery program, and I thought she was talking about being an alcoholic, because that's the only sort of recovery I knew of. And she, size-wise, we were very, very different, so it just didn't click to me. But I remember her explaining, like, yeah, I just, like, eat food in the car all the time, and I'm just always eating. And when I went through, my rock bottoms were sort of like a series of stages where I did the master cleanse, and then, like, came out of it and, like, felt crazy.
Right,
Like,
I've done that, too, and it's like, wow, who am I?
I know.
Did I just run over a berm? Yeah.
That thing is so funny, actually. I mean, so many people that still do it. I mean, it just, for me, I couldn't. And I'm so thankful to her, because had she not said anything, I just would have been in this place of feeling crazy. And so when I was on this very important job and feeling nuts and, like, just being completely out of control, I basically called her. And that was for me, the first sort of step into, like, recovery and getting help. And when I met a bunch of other people through her that had the same issue, but they freaked me out, so I just kind of ignored it for another 6 months. And then again, because something huge happened in my life with this relationship, I just went right back to it. And then it was just undeniable. I was like, well, I don't know who else is going to help me. All of my friends think I'm just being my family and friends at that time, I think, thought I was just being emotional, and I like to make a big deal out of things, and you're so dramatic, Tchaiko. And yeah, so it was like I had to go back to the place where people knew exactly what I was talking about.
Right. And I think for you to be able to go to that place, correct me if I'm wrong, but you needed to know what you were talking about, because I think key to what you said was just, oh, I'm the only one who can help myself. I think reaching out to other people, connecting with other people is definitely a major step in going forward. Just stating, what it is that you are feeling is a brave step, but then actually knowing, well, the only person that can make the step is me. Nobody can sort of do that for me is also a really important step.
Yeah. I mean, I have, like, philosophical, like, not very clear about that, because for me it felt like, I mean, clearly I had to be the one to go and ask help, but I think for other people, this is really important for me to say, for other people who are at that place where I was, it actually doesn't feel like you have any, like, you feel completely hopeless, and like there's nothing that you can do, and the only thing I could do really was be like, hey, I need help. But beyond that, like, I couldn't do anything. And I think for me, the reason why the film is so important is because it's one thing to hear me say that. It's another thing to be in a story. And that's why it's a narrative and not a documentary. It's another thing to be in a story and sort of be in someone's life and their feelings. And that's what you get to do when you read a book or when you watch a movie, is to try and understand. I mean, I honestly think even people who don't have eating disorders or who are not alcoholics or don't deal with a kind of addiction, I think it's a common human thing where you can at least identify with the feeling of, like, hopelessness and, like, just wanting to be different and not being able to, in whatever context. And that, I think, is the core. For me, it was just around food and body image. For somebody, it might be around, like, I don't know, they can't stop gambling. Or for somebody, it might be like, I'm so obsessed with, like, Facebook and it's ruining my life. I mean, it sounds dramatic, but I do think...
No, I think that there are compulsive behaviors, and there are triggers for compulsive behaviors, and things like addiction and, things like online, really trigger those sorts of things. So I do see the connection there. So how did you channel all of this that you were feeling into your film?
Wow. Well, it was a series of stages. I first conceived of the film when I was like maybe, I guess, over 11 years ago. I had an artist retreat, which is why they're so important, because artists need time. But I was on an artist retreat in Cape Cod by myself for a month in the winter, and I just had a lot of time to myself. And ironically, I'd also just gotten out of another relationship. And at that time, I didn't know about the eating disorder, but I knew that I had this obsession with wanting to be like other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story started with a girl who felt like she was obsessed with her neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd worked at a video store and watched this movie. One of my favorite directors is Krzysztof Kieslowski. He's this Polish director, and he did the trilogy Red, White, and Blue.
Mm-hmm.
But he has this other series called The Decalogue, and they're hour-long films. And there was this one film that I just got so attached to, and it's this sort of very dorky, awkward guy, which is how I see myself, even though that's not how other people see me, who becomes obsessed with this woman who is just like sexy and beautiful, and he watches her through the window, and with time in the movie you see that she actually has all these issues, and then they eventually meet. And so that was really the inspiration when I was alone in Cape Cod in the winter, like just sort of channeling and processing, like really wanting to not be myself and be somebody else, but then realizing that like we all have like inside the same stuff going on, the same ugly stuff. And so that's where, in the short film, the short film really focuses on that. This one girl who's obsessed with another, who then finds out, well, she's got a lot of problems too. And then for the feature, I just wanted to like explode the world of this friendship. And I really have an affinity for teenagers. Like a lot of my other work before, like I've done a documentary on HIV and risk factors in youth in New York City. And I worked with all these adolescents and youth, and I just so spirited and so much energy, and such a time, I think, where it's like your body is grown up and like you think you're grown up, but you're not 20, even up to 25, your brain hasn't fully formed. Right. So that sort of age group is fascinating to me. And I think I'm emotionally stuck as a 12-year-old maybe.
It's a little arrested development, huh?
And I just remember at that age, like loving all those like high school movies where it's like first kiss and like sorting out being sexual and your identity. And so for the feature, the eating disorder stuff is there because it's part of the characters, but the focus of the film is really this friendship between these two girls, and it's like one girl who thinks the other one is super cool, and then, sort of what happens. And so that's what I think is going to be very relatable to a lot of people, but then I get to slip in there, this other thing.
Right, this thing that's going on in the background, so to speak, but, is so sort of fully informs one of your characters. And I think it's such an important, thing, because what's so universal is, us, the things that trigger the ugly stuff inside of us is comparing ourselves to others often, right? And so looking through the window at somebody else and seeing like, oh, this person has this perfect life, I want to emulate her or him. And they look through the window like they're just living and being this person that I want to aspire to. And then when you actually get to know them, you're like, oh, you got a lot of shit going on too. It's not this perfect little picture that I sort of created for myself. So it's important. That's a universal way in, I think, to a lot of feelings we have. So I know that from, I believe, and you tell me again if this is a right encapsulation, but I believe that because we've been talking for a little while, you doing the film, but then also putting like all your stuff behind doing a feature film and exploding this story, as you say, is also sort of a way for you to bravely step forward with your own story and talking about, your own personal journey that like informs this. And some of what you've been doing is also just talking to groups of girls, right? And so you had, I know, a recent experience where you talked with a group of young girls, right? And it was completely shocking to you how so many people were like, I have the same sort of issue and I need to speak about it, and you speaking about it helps them to do that. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. I'm not going to say the name of the group, but I went there, and I think there were I want to say there were like 11 or 12 women, and the age range was from, I think, like 15 or 16 up to 32. And I started by just talking about myself and my issues. And then we went around the room and, I just asked questions like, has anybody dealt with death? Because for me, having death in my life was a trigger, or I guess underneath a lot of my issues. And I think I'm very intuitive with people's energy. I think even just talking about death and trauma in life, it was like the floodgates opened, and one person talked about her father dying, but like never being able to cry. A girl talked about her mother dying at like 14, and then as the conversation progressed, we got into like, oh yeah, when my like mother died, I started. I forget the name of it, taking my hair out.
Mm-hmm.
And so she, and all the things she was describing about her pulling out her hair just sounded exactly like me and eating, the compulsion of it. And then another woman talked about like, yeah, not being able to cry for her father, and then like what she did instead, which is like working or like fixing other people. And then as the conversation grew some more, then like a lot of the other girls started talking about like, yeah, well, I think a girl had, I'm trying to be anonymous with this. A girl talked about something on her body that she was always ashamed of, and when she moved to a new place, she just sort of hid out in a room and ate, and just ate and couldn't stop eating, and that was the only thing that she was doing. And then she lost a bunch of weight, but it wasn't in a healthy way. It was like starving. And then another girl, like out the blue, the 16-year-old girl is like telling us stories about like her, because we started talking about the internet and social media, and out of the blue she's like talking about how she's like taking a break from social media, and then she says she was bulimic. And it's like, even if we don't always have the words for the things like bulimia or anorexia or exercise bulimia or binge eating disorder, it was like the conversation,
or
exactly,
right.
It was like it was there, the emotional eating, the compulsion, the like isolating yourself from everybody, the thinking that like there's something wrong with you but not telling anybody, the keeping it, it was, and literally almost, I want to say almost half of them had something that one could consider some sort of compulsion, around food or around body. And that just blew me away, because I thought I was going to be there and like talk, and maybe they might have a friend, but it was like out the work people, and they were all women of color, which, even like literally, I think when I first reached out to you was the beginning of this year, like it's been an ongoing process where I'm constantly trying to speak to groups who work with young women about, can I come in, can we do a workshop, or, can I have the girls involved in this film in some way? And it's just landed on, I don't even know what to call it, but basically I've gotten responses that make me feel as if I should go back in the closet. Like, we don't talk about that stuff here,
right.
And it's fascinating to me. And it was like really at first, like really destroyed me. And then afterwards I got all this fuel where I was like, okay, no, this is the reason why I need to do this. And it's, and with the film, even more than just talking about like all the different narrative fun stuff of the film, but to really almost like come out for other people. And boy, there have been like a lot of women and men who have like emailed me or sent me messages through Kickstarter privately saying, thank you, I deal with this too, my mother deals with this is for my sisters, a guy being like, and I'm glad that people are starting to see that men deal with it too. And so, that's kind of what fuels me.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Seeing that your passion and your work can actually be a support for people. Yeah. So obviously this is, like you said, like a universal message, and important for other people to hear, whether they're suffering from those compulsions or seeing other people in their lives suffering from those compulsions. But do you think it has a specific and impactful place for women of color?
I mean, only in that you get to see yourself, and I think that that's hugely important. I don't think that this film is doing anything different if there were white characters in there. I just think that we don't see ourselves on TV. I know I didn't see myself really growing up on TV or movies, and even when I watch movies now, because there are a lot more people of color on TV than when I was growing up, it still doesn't always feel like me. They're either like super, super skinny, or it's a girl
super
like
beautiful,
that,
or
something. But so for me, it's like, there's certain films that I love actually, because I feel like you see more people that look like folks you would go to school with, and not someone that's like, oh my God, that looks like a celebrity.
Like what? But, can you name some of them?
Yeah, I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful to me. Michonne in The Walking Dead. I just think she's I love her. She's gorgeous.
Yeah.
and that's not her real name in real life. I always go
Right.
for characters. Um, in Pariah, there was a movie called Pariah that a friend of mine made. Like, her characters were all beautiful, and they all looked like people that I knew, and I happened to know most of them. Um, you know, Ava made folks look like people that you know, and not these like faraway creatures on a golden throne of Hollywood that so they're not that many, but that's what's like coming to my mind right now. Yeah,
That's great. And I think, viewing your short, it's the same. These are people who are beautiful, but they also just look like real people, and people that you feel like look like you and me, and can relate. I want to ask you about, because I think this is important too, because I think stories like yours really also touch not only the topic that you're focusing on, but also touch sort of a good positive nerve, for lack of a better word, and inspiring people to take action to fulfill the things that they want to fulfill in their lives. So as someone who, and this is like me too, you have to work to pay your bills, and then you have to balance your off time with putting all this free investment of time into your passion. And how do you, it's sort of the question I sort of want to ask you, and I'm asking it in a really inarticulate way, is like, how do you keep going with all of that stuff? Because it's not easy.
No. I honestly think this was an epiphany. It's like having what you're doing be meaningful to somebody else and connecting with those people. That, I think, is what is energy, gives you energy. Before, I think I was in a bubble, and I was like pushing and pushing, and I would work in production and then come and like try and do my film and then relationship, and I honestly felt like I was falling apart. Like, and this year, I remember a friend of mine who's this brilliant, brilliant filmmaker, and she screens her films in colleges, and she was like, Tchaiko, you need to connect to community. She's like, you have to be talking and meeting the people that are watching these films, because it will give you energy. And I really, that really inspired me to try and go out to community organizations and connect with the young women that way with my film. And I think you can do that with like any film. Like, when I'm done this film, I'm moving on to like the magical part of me, which is like fantasy films. And like, even with that, there are ways to connect with people around fantasy and magic, and I just think it's all about like, you get energy from other people instead of if you stay in a bubble trying to like do everything by yourself.
Right. That's a really great point. Really great point. Who share your passion. You get energy from other people who are like, oh, yes, do this. And it also, I think, builds a cohort. Community is so important because it builds a cohort around, you can do this. It's like, I acknowledge that this is not always easy, but you can do this, and we want you to do this. That's part of like the energy, I think, that you get from, something that I do sometimes with all the work that I do. It's like, you in that bubble, and I've been in those places. I still get in those bubbles every once in a while, but you start to just feel like you're alone with your like computer and your equipment, just producing, and you're like, I want to go out and see a friend, but I can't. I gotta get this done. And when I go out and do talks or just meet with friends, they're always like, you're doing so much, and you're so like amazing, and it's so great to hear that, because you don't feel it when you're in that bubble. You just feel like, I'm not doing enough, or working fast enough, or smart enough, or whatever it is. So it is really important to get out there and get with your community, whether it's a community around the topic that you're working on, or just your friends and people who love you, to tell you, keep going.
Totally. Yeah. I'm just curious, what is the thing that made you respond to me? Because there were so many people. I mean, I'm like so happy when I got I was so happy when I got your email, because there were so many people that were like, yeah, okay, that's nice. But it was like, when I got your email back, it felt like such support and such sisterhood. And literally, we hadn't met, we hadn't even Skyped. And I just want to say I'm so grateful for that, because I do think it's so important to have connections with other women, with other people, like, and I'm just curious about what it is about you that made you respond, or is that just something that you do, that you're so open? And
I do think it's something that I do, and I appreciate that. I think that's so Awesome. I do think it's something that I do, but I think in my core, just when somebody asks, can I just have a bit of your time and support? I just always think, yes. That's like immediately what I think is yes, of course, because I've wanted and got that for myself. So seeing how those things helped me, I just feel so like, and every molecule of my body, like we should be lifting each other up, And so when somebody asks for that, I'm always like, abso-fucking-lutely. Like, what can I do? Because I think even that first Skype call that we had, right? It was just us talking.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you came to me and said, I need XYZ, or I'm hoping. It was just like, let's just talk.
Yeah.
And in that talk, we found, I think, kindred spirits in each other, and like an ability to go back and forth and just be like, I got you, and now you're part of my community, I'm part of yours. And that is such a beautiful result for me. Like, I feel like it's just such a cool thing, and it feels so good. So feeling this way will always make me say yes.
Yeah, I think that's like so important. And one of the things with my film that I really want to have come across is the importance of this friendship between the two girls.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times people think that, girls get catty with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I am dealing with like jealousy and some of these things that we would, normally think wouldn't make women, sort of help each other. But I really, really want to show how beautiful this friendship is in the film, despite some of the like dysfunctional things that go on, because I do think for me that's eventually what saved me and what will always save me is my friendships and my relationships, but particularly with women.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's a great thing. Well, that's a great thing to end on. I am thrilled to know you. I'm thrilled to support your project. It's a great thing. Everybody check out Solace, the film, and go to Kickstarter to back this campaign. Thanks, Tchaiko.
Thanks, Jen. Have a good day.
You too.